Sometimes the solution is so simple it's staring you in the face. Or you just ask your partner to take a look at it and say, hey man, what do you think of these two ideas? And they go, well, why don't you just do this? And then you go, yeah, duh. Fernando looked at the problem. He's like, why don't you just mount the high amp towards the front? That'll give you plenty of room to run the wiring for power over this side instead of around the back like I was thinking. And our signal wire will be right here out of the way. We can run this RCA over and down. We've put both amplifiers on risers, so we have plenty of room to do that. And the power wire will stay right across here. We still have room to put our screw in, and everything is hunky-dory. We can put the logo on here. This one doesn't have one, which is a total bummer. We need to start getting this all wired up. When I wire up amplifiers, I like to think of them as zones or regions. First region is your signal routing, meaning the RCAs, where are they gonna go? Second is speaker and how those are gonna go. And last is the power region and how they're gonna go. Now you can do in any order you want, meaning you can do power, signal, then speaker, it doesn't matter. Don't jump around, meaning get all the RCA section done or all the power wire done first and then move on to the next one. Be thinking of how these wires have to run. So like I know these two have to cross. When I'm coming down, I have to make sure that I come down far enough that I can tuck it in. Also, when this power wire comes around, I know it has to clear this screw, so it's gonna be somewhere in this area. Be aware of what you're doing as far as your wire routing. To keep the wire nice and pretty, make sure you head over to mobilesolutions-usa.com and pick up your wire ruler. Because this has a premium audio system, there's an amplifier located in the driver's kick panel with all the wiring that we need to get to the speakers, except for the tweeters, which we said we're running new wires to, but we had them go directly to that. To integrate into the factory wiring, we're going to be using the iData AFO3. The reason this harness exists is if we were going to keep the factory radio, we could go into a DSR1 or any other compatible AR product, plug into where the factory amplifier is, plug into that module, and add a full system from there. Preamps, the whole 9 yards, it'll integrate into the car. It also works as a wonderful adapter for this instance where we're putting a new radio in. We need to bypass the factory amplifier. I don't want to cut all the harnesses because these all plug in. In the harness, we get the gray connector that's going to match up to the factory grade connector. This is going to give us our door speakers as well as our rear deck speakers, and they are factory colors: gray, green, purple, and white, just like the ones we talked about for the radio. And the brown harness have the mid-range and center channel wires. We won't be using the center channel, but we'll be retaining the mid-range, so we'll use these white and gray, and they have a red stripe. The red stripe is negative. And then if we need to loop any of the wiring from the radio, such as like the rear speakers to be powered off the radio, because doing a front stage upgrade, well, you can use these here and loop them into their corresponding harnesses over here. And just like the RR harness, remove all the tape, figure out how we want it to go, hop into the car, unplug the amplifier, we can plug these in and run our wires to them. We're not ready to do that yet, but I wanted to talk about how this harness was going to make installation into this car a lot cleaner. We won't have to go and cut all these factory harnesses. For me, the first thing I'm going to start with is the RCAs, the input signal. I've prepped my cable for this, and then I've put colored ends on to denote what is happening. I always keep the subwoofer just naked, and then everything else has that same white, gray, green, purple on them, and I put it on both ends. I'm going to start with the sub amp. We've also decided to add in a bass knob. I'm going to run that with my RCA also. I want to keep it tucked up into the amplifier. I need to come all the way out with it because I still have all that power wire here that's going to wrap around. I like to run my fingers along the RCAs to get them as straight as possible. You don't want to get them all tangled and whatnot, especially when you're doing something like this where there's a 6-channel RCA. Plug it into the amp. Make sure when you get started here to leave enough RCA so that you can unplug these and plug these back in if you need to. Don't make it so tight that you can't do that. When putting in your zip ties, you have to pay attention to where the head is going to be, especially if you're going to add more zip ties into the hole, so that frees up the hole. The head tends to block the hole, and it makes it hard to put another zip tie in. When I put them in, I'm going to put them starting at the front hole closest to this amplifier. That way the head is closest to this, and that'll leave the hole open if I need to drill any more holes to run wires along. And that is the run for the RCAs. At closer look, we have the two here. Stack them side by side so it still looks like one RCA, and then they turned in to meet this. That's why I stacked them side by side like this, so they could turn and make this. This one is laying flat, these are on top of it like this. So you have these two, and that will allow me to bring this into the single strand RCA, keep it looking like a single RCA all the way down till it initially ends here at the bottom. It will wrap up to the back side of the car and come back around to the front. Next, I'm going to deal with my speaker wires. For that, I've made up a bundle. We have whites and grays, and then we have three colors depending on what speaker is going to what. A black stripe, which is going to be the mid-bass, blue stripe, which will be the mid-range, orange stripe, which is going to be our tweeter. They'll come in just like this, mount up against, and then turn and head into the amplifier so it maintains that same look. When putting the zip ties in along this side, the heads are on the outsides here because I knew I was going to be coming back in with the speaker wire. We taped this up, and then I added a piece of shrink wrap here to the end to finish it off. I know all my zip ties are lined up exactly how I need them. I just need to figure out where my turn point is here in the center, and that means that this guy is going to be my first drill point. Line it up with that hole from the wire ruler. One of the cool things about having this amplifier up on risers is the wire ruler does come with a shorter version of it, but I can slide up underneath it here and make these now that I have this wire here, so I can't use the whole ruler when it's time to do that. The top row was positive, the bottom row is negative. That means I'm going to cut them shorter so they'll be like this, and then I'm going to add some wire ferrules onto the ends of each one of the wires. I also have some red and black heat shrink so that I can have it look more uniform. But the first step is to get this zip tied down into place, and then we'll add the ferrules and screw it in. Speaker wires are in and all set. We are going to have to set the crossovers on this when we're done. We're going to be using a crossover calibrator. To do that, we need to undo all of these speaker wires. Note to self, when you're getting to that point where you're going to put these in, torque them down just enough to hold them in place, but that's it. Don't do the final twist on them yet, because all of them are going to have to come out. That leads to the last, which is the power side of things. But the first thing we're going to do in that is the remote turn on, because the remote turn on is going to go down the driver's side of the car with these pieces. I have some remote turn on that I've already cut into place. One is longer than the other. This gives us a good time to kind of talk about what a ferrule is. You strip this wire and then you put it into the little twist down terminal, like something like this where it has a screw. What happens is it tears the wire, and that isn't the greatest thing you could hope for. Ferrule is a little tiny sleeve like this that goes over the wire, and that will help it to bundle it together. But the finishing touch on that is to use a ferrule crimper. And what that does is that compresses the wire in and makes it like a solid lug. You should be able to pull on it just like this. And now when that screw goes in, it's not going to tear the wire apart. However, tighten it up. You don't have to like, you know, you're not torque wrenching this thing. I have blue Tech Flex. Measure my wire out here. I also have blue heat shrink. Cut a small portion of it, go over the end, heat it up. Now on these X series amplifiers, they have these cool power plugs, but they go in plug side up. Power wires are on the sides, which is fine, but the remote turn on is on the bottom. Need to get that in now, and that'll plug into place here. I've drilled my holes next to my RCA, and we'll get the remote turn on in this amplifier, and we'll take a look at that. The remote turn on wire is all done. Came out of this amplifier, followed the two along the side here, and it just comes down and around and off to the bottom with the rest of these. And that finishes the signal, the remote turn on. But the remote turn on is part of the power, which we're not done yet. I've put together some runs of power wire. One for here, it's gonna come up around and hidden into this one. I have my distribution over here for my power. That is the next step of this, figuring out how this is going to go. I'm gonna ground it over here in this corner. There's a factory hole here. I made my wire long enough for that. And I want to keep it tucked in this way and across this. plug it into the amplifier, and then just kind of get an idea of where I want to run this. I've got a power that I need to keep in mind is going to come around this side. This ground wire comes into this amplifier like that. And then it also has a power wire. Could pinch them together and have all 4 wires lined up here. I could also go on top of each other like this till I get over to this side and then lay them down flat. But the only thing to do is, of course, just do it and figure it out. I opted to go for the stack on top of one another and then fan out on this side. But let's take a closer look at all of this.